One careless comment at a family dinner turned a night of laughter into the most painful moment of my life. They say words don't hurt, but one sentence from my uncle shattered the way I saw my family. I'm Sarah, 25, and up until that night, I thought family dinners were my safe haven. You know how it is? Those evenings where the house smells like mom's lasagna, the tables packed with relatives, and everyone's talking over each other like it's a competition. It's loud, it's messy, but it's home. That's how it was supposed to be anyway. We were all gathered at my parents' place in suburban Chicago, the kind of neighborhood where every house looks the same, and the neighbors pretend they don't notice your business. But then my Uncle Mike, with one stupid, thoughtless comment, turned the whole night into a disaster I can't stop replaying. It was a Saturday, one of those crisp fall evenings where the leaves are just starting to turn, and you can smell wood smoke in the air. Mom had been cooking all day, stressing over every detail like she was auditioning for a cooking show. Dad was in the living room, fiddling with the Bluetooth speaker to get his classic rock playlist going, because apparently nobody can eat without Led Zeppelin in the background. My younger brother Jake was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through TikTok, while my cousins, Emily and Matt, were helping Mom set the table, mostly so they could sneak bites of garlic bread. And then there was Uncle Mike, Dad's older brother, who showed up with a bottle of cheap red wine and his usual loud laugh that fills every corner of the room. I was in a good mood, for once. I'd just landed a new client for my freelance copywriting gig, which meant I could finally stop stressing about rent for a couple months. I'm not gonna lie, being a freelancer in your 20s is a roller coaster. Half the time you're hustling, the other half you're wondering why you didn't just get a boring office job like everyone else. But that night, I felt like I was on top of the world. I was wearing my favorite sweater, the soft gray one that makes me feel like I've got my life together, and I was ready to just eat, laugh, and forget about the world for a few hours. The dining room was packed when we all sat down. Mom's lasagna was the star of the show, steaming in the middle of the table, surrounded by a salad nobody would eat, garlic bread that was already half gone, and a pitcher of iced tea that Jake kept hogging. Uncle Mike was at one end of the table, holding court like he always does, telling some story about a fishing trip he took last summer. My cousins were egging him on, laughing at all the right moments, while Dad nodded along, probably only half listening. Mom was in her usual mode, making sure everyone's plates were full before she even sat down. And me? I was just soaking it all in, feeling like maybe, just maybe, I'd found my place in this chaotic family. Then it happened. Uncle Mike was mid-story, waving his fork around like a conductor when he turned to me out of nowhere. "So, Sarah," he said, his voice loud enough to cut through the chatter, "when are you gonna stop playing around with this writing nonsense and get a real job? You're not a kid anymore. What's the plan? Live in your parents' basement forever?" The room went dead silent, like horror movie silent, the kind where you can hear the ice clinking in someone's glass. My stomach dropped and I felt this hot, prickly feeling crawl up my neck. Did he just say that? In front of everyone. I looked around, expecting someone to jump in to tell him to shut up, but nobody did. Mom froze, her serving spoon hovering over the lasagna. Dad coughed into his napkin, like he was trying to pretend he didn't hear it. Jake's eyes were glued to his plate, and my cousins were suddenly fascinated by their garlic bread. I tried to laugh it off because that's what you do, right? You don't make a scene at family dinner. "Ha, yeah, Uncle Mike, I'm doing fine, thanks for the concern," I said, but my voice came out shaky and I could feel my face burning. I wanted to disappear, to crawl under the table and never come out. But Uncle Mike wasn't done. Of course he wasn't. He's the kind of guy who thinks he's being helpful when he's really just stomping all over you. "I'm serious, kid," he said, leaning back in his chair like he was about to drop some profound wisdom. "You're what, 26 now? You can't keep messing around with these side hustles. Look at Emily, she's got a steady job at the bank, benefits, 401k, the whole deal. You need to grow up, Sarah. Stop dreaming and start doing." That's when something in me snapped. I don't know if it was the way he said dreaming, like my entire career was some childish fantasy, or the fact that nobody was saying a word to defend me. I slammed my fork down, hard enough that the table shook, and stood up. "First of all, I'm 25, not 26, I said, my voice louder than I meant it to be. "And second, my nonsense pays my bills, Uncle Mike. Maybe if you spent less time judging me and more time figuring out why your own kids don't talk to you, we'd all be better off." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily's mouth fell open, and Matt looked like he was trying not to laugh. Jake's head snapped up, his phone forgotten. Mom gasped, "Sarah, that's enough." but I was already too far gone. Dad was staring at me like I'd just set the table on fire. Uncle Mike's face turned this weird shade of red, like he couldn't decide whether to yell or storm out. I didn't give him the chance to decide. "I'm done," I said, pushing my chair back so hard it scraped the floor. "Thanks for dinner, Mom, but I'm not hungry anymore." I grabbed my phone and stormed out of the dining room, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I heard Mom call after me, but I didn't stop. I went straight to the front door, grabbed my jacket, and walked out into the chilly night air. I ended up sitting on the porch swing, my breath fogging up in front of me, trying to figure out why I was so angry. It wasn't just Uncle Mike's words, though they stung like hell. It was the way they landed, like a punch I didn't see coming. I've always known he's a loudmouth, the kind of guy who thinks he's the authority on everyone's life. But that night it felt personal, like he'd taken all my insecurities, about my career, my future, whether I'm actually good enough, and thrown them in my face in front of the people who matter most. I must have been out there for 20 minutes swinging back and forth when Jake came outside. He didn't say anything at first, just sat next to me, his hands stuffed in his hoodie pockets. "You good?" he finally asked. "No," I said, staring at the ground. "I'm really not." He nodded like he got it. "Uncle Mike's a jerk, always has been. You didn't say anything that wasn't true." I laughed, but it came out more like a choke. "Yeah, but now I'm the bad guy, right? For talking back." "Nah," Jake said, shrugging. "You just said what everyone's been thinking for years." We sat there for a while, not talking, just listening to the crickets and the faint hum of the neighbor's TV through an open window. I kept replaying Uncle Mike's words in my head, playing around. Grow up, dreaming. They hurt because part of me was afraid he was right. What if I was just kidding myself with this freelance thing? What if I was never going to be as successful as Emily or as stable, as Mom and Dad wanted me to be? And the worst part, nobody in that room had my back. Not Mom, not Dad, not even my cousins, who I thought were my friends. That night didn't just ruin dinner. It cracked something open in me, something I didn't even know was there. I started wondering if I really belonged in this family, or if they'd always see me as the screw-up, the one who didn't follow the right path. And as much as I wanted to shrug it off, to pretend Uncle Mike's words didn't matter, they did. They stuck like a splinter you can't pull out, and I knew things would never feel quite the same again. I don't know how long I sat on that porch swing, the cold seeping through my sweater, making my fingers numb. The street was quiet, just the occasional car passing by, headlights cutting through the dark. Inside, I could hear muffled voices, Mom's sharp tone, Dad's low murmur, and Uncle Mike's loud, defensive laugh like he was trying to play off what just happened. Jake was still next to me, not saying much, just kicking at the porch railing with his sneaker. I wanted to go back inside, grab my keys, and drive back to my apartment, but something kept me glued to that swing. Maybe it was the hope that someone would come out and say, "Sarah, you're right, he was out of line." But nobody did. Finally, Jake broke the silence. "You want to go get ice cream or something? Like get out of here for a bit?" I looked at him, his hoodie pulled up, his face half lit by the porch light. He's 19, still in that awkward phase where he's half kid, half adult, but he's always been my go-to when things get rough. "Ice cream," I said, raising an eyebrow. "It's like 40 degrees out here." "Yeah, but it's never too cold for Dairy Queen," he said, grinning. "Come on, my treat." I almost said no, but the idea of staying on that porch, waiting for Mom to come out and lecture me about respecting elders, was worse. So I nodded, grabbed my jacket, and we hopped into Jake's beat-up Honda Civic, the one he's been driving since he got his license. The radio was blasting some pop-punk band he's obsessed with, and for a few minutes, we didn't talk about the dinner or Uncle Mike or anything. It was just us, cruising through the suburbs, the neon glow of strip malls lighting up the night. We ended up at the Dairy Queen a few miles away, the one we used to beg Mom to take us to when we were kids. Jake ordered a Blizzard with like 5 different mix-ins, because apparently he's still 12, and I got a soft serve cone, mostly to have something to do with my hands. We sat in a booth by the window, the fluorescent lights making everything feel too bright, too real. I kept licking my ice cream, trying to focus on the cold sweetness instead of the knot in my chest. "So," Jake said, digging into his Blizzard, "you gonna tell me what's really going on? Cause that wasn't just about Uncle Mike being a dick." I sighed, staring at my cone like it held all the answers. "I don't know, Jake. It's just, he didn't just call out my job. He made it sound like I'm wasting my life, like I'm some loser who's never gonna amount to anything." And nobody said a word. Not Mom, not Dad, not even Emily, who's supposed to be my best friend. Jake nodded, swirling his spoon in his cup. "Yeah, that sucked, but you know how they are." Mom's all about keeping the peace, and Dad's scared of his own shadow when it comes to family drama. I laughed, but it came out bitter. Yeah, but it's not just them. It's like I've been trying so hard to make this freelance thing work, to prove I can do it, and then Uncle Mike just— I stopped, my throat tightening. He just said what I'm already afraid of, that I'm not good enough. Jake leaned back, his eyebrows scrunching up like he was actually thinking about what I said. Okay, but you're not like failing, Sarah. You've got clients, right? You're paying your rent, living in the city, doing your thing. That's more than most people our age can say. Maybe, I said, but it didn't feel true. The thing is, freelancing sounds cool when you're pitching it to other people, set your own hours, be your own boss, all that jazz. But in reality, it's late nights stressing over invoices, clients ghosting you, and that constant voice in your head whispering, "What if you're not cut out for this?" Uncle Mike's comment just turned that whisper into a scream. We sat there for a while, eating our ice cream, watching cars pull in and out of the parking lot. I kept thinking about what Jake said about how I wasn't failing. But it wasn't just about my job. It was about the way my family saw me, or didn't see me. Like I was still the kid who drew comics in her notebook instead of studying for math tests. Like I was never going to be as together as Emily with her bank job, or as responsible as Mom and Dad, who have been married for 30 years and have a mortgage and a 401k, and all the things I'm supposed to want. When we got back to the house, the driveway was emptier. Uncle Mike's SUV was gone, thank God, but Emily and Matt's cars were still there. I braced myself as we walked inside, expecting Mom to be waiting with a lecture. Sure enough, she was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter like it had personally offended her. Dad was nowhere in sight, probably hiding in his office, pretending to work. "Sarah," Mom said, not looking up from her cleaning. "We need to talk." Jake gave me a look like good luck and slipped upstairs, leaving me to face the music. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. "Okay, let's talk." Mom finally stopped scrubbing and turned to me, her face all pinched and tired. "What you said to your uncle was completely out of line. You embarrassed him in front of everyone." I stared at her, my jaw practically on the floor. "I embarrassed him? Mom, he called my career nonsense. He said I need to grow up like I'm some kid playing pretend. And you just sat there," she sighed, tossing the sponge into the sink. "Sarah, he didn't mean it like that. He's just worried about you. We all are. This freelance thing, it's not stable. You don't have health insurance or retirement plan." "Oh my God, Mom, not this again." I cut her off, my voice louder than I meant. "I'm not starving, I'm not homeless. I'm doing what I love, and I'm good at it. Why can't you just be proud of me?" She looked at me like I'd slapped her. "I am proud of you, Sarah, but you're so stubborn sometimes, you don't think about the future. What happens when you're 40 and you don't have savings? Or when you want to start a family?" I laughed, but it was sharp, almost mean. "A family? Mom, I can barely afford my rent. And honestly, after tonight, I'm not even sure I want to be around this family." That was a low blow, and I knew it the second it came out. Mom's eyes got all shiny, like she was about to cry, and I felt like the worst person alive. But before I could say anything, she shook her head and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there, alone with the dirty dishes and the hum of the fridge. I didn't sleep much that night. I crashed in my old bedroom, surrounded by posters of bands I used to love and a bookshelf full of novels I haven't touched in years. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Uncle Mike's voice, that smug, "Stop dreaming and start doing." I kept seeing Mom's face, the way she looked at me like I was a disappointment, and I kept wondering if maybe they were right. Maybe I was chasing something that wasn't real, something that would leave me with nothing but regrets. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of Dad banging around in the garage. I dragged myself downstairs, hoping to avoid another fight, but Emily was at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I walked in, her expression unreadable. "Hey," she said, setting her phone down. "You okay?" I shrugged, pouring myself a cup of coffee just to have something to do. "Not really. You—" She hesitated like she was picking her words carefully. "I'm sorry about last night. I should have said something when Uncle Mike went off on you." "Yeah, you should have," I said, sharper than I meant. "You're supposed to be my friend, Em. You know how hard I've been working. Why didn't you back me up?" She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know, Sarah. It all happened so fast and I didn't want to make it worse. But you're right, I should have said something. I didn't know how." I wanted to stay mad, but looking at her, I could tell she felt bad. Emily's always been the good cousin, steady job, nice apartment, engaged to a guy who checks all the boxes. But she's not perfect, and I knew she didn't mean to let me down. Still, it hurt. It's fine, I said, even though it wasn't. I don't know how to deal with this. It's like nobody gets me. Emily nodded, her eyes soft. I get it, and for what it's worth, I think what you're doing is awesome. Freelancing takes guts. I could never do it. I smiled just a little, but it felt like the first real moment of connection since the dinner went to hell. Maybe Emily wasn't my enemy, maybe nobody was, but that didn't make the ache in my chest go away. Over the next few days, things stayed weird. Mom and I barely talked, just polite pass-the-salt stuff at meals. Dad kept trying to act like nothing happened, cracking dumb jokes that nobody laughed at. Jake texted me memes to cheer me up, but even he could tell I was off. I went back to my apartment in the city, hoping distance would help, but it didn't. I kept replaying the dinner, wondering what I could have said differently, wondering why I cared so much about what Uncle Mike thought. Work didn't help either. I had deadlines piling up, but every time I opened my laptop, I just stared at the screen, paralyzed. What if Uncle Mike was right? What if this was all a mistake? I started checking job boards, looking at listings for stable jobs, marketing coordinator, content manager, stuff with benefits and a cubicle. But the thought of giving up freelancing, of trading my freedom for a 9 to 5, made me feel like I was suffocating. A week later, I got a text from Uncle Mike. No apology, just a long ramble about how he was just trying to help and how I took it the wrong way. I didn't reply. I didn't know how. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to tell him exactly how much he'd hurt me. But another part of me just wanted to move on, to prove him wrong by succeeding on my own terms. That's when I decided I wasn't going to let his words define me. I didn't know how yet, but I was going to figure it out. Maybe that meant doubling down on my freelance gigs, pitching bigger clients, or maybe it meant having a real talk with my family about what I needed from them. Whatever it was, I wasn't going to let one careless comment or one disastrous dinner break me. So that is for today's story. Like, share it with others, and subscribe.